Welcome everybody, it's the Signalling Guy and we are ready for episode 4 of my podcast, Signalling Failures. We're going to look at an accident that happened at Knowle in Dorridge way back in 1963. It's still got a lot to teach us about today's signalling. So let's shrink me down and we'll jump in and find out what went wrong. Now, if you are a whiteboard zoomer, if you have been on the LinkedIn and you've been pinching in and zooming to see what's on the board, you'll find that in that gap where that blue pen is, I have recently taken the big rubber and I have taken it out, a bit that said Knowle, it actually said Knowles and Dorridge. It is everything I can possibly do to stop myself saying Knowles. I don't know why I keep saying Knowles and Dorridge. I'm going to try and stop it. Again, I'm from Scotland, I'm from Glasgow. I will be saying Knowle and Dorridge. If it's called Knowle or something completely different, I think maybe it's not even called, maybe you don't even pronounce the R's or something. If this is your local town and I'm besmirching it by saying Knowle or Knowles, feel free to correct me in the comments. I will publish an apology. So anyway, I do think it is Knowle in Dorridge, and I don't need these. The reason I think that is because I have been there many times now. If you're from Dorridge, let's put everyone else that's not from Dorridge in the picture. Here's Dorridge, so it's just outside of Birmingham. Maybe that was a bit too fast. There we go. There's Birmingham. Out past Solihull. There's Dorridge. Now, I used to work for a company who had a fantastic cricket day every year. And we used to go to the Knowles. I can see it already. I don't even need to. The what? The Knowles and Dorridge Rackets Club. Right. Oh well. It was the cricket club when we used to go. Maybe it's changed. I can still see the cricket field. It's in the right place. I don't think there were tennis courts when we used to go. Maybe that's new. Maybe it was just a long time ago and I've forgotten. Anyway, cricket pitches are still there. Let's have a look. What's Google got for us? Street view. Still there. Sign says tennis rackets club. Anyway, that aside, that absolute shock aside, surely the good citizens of Knowle and Dorridge, or Knowle or Dorridge, are still playing cricket. Surely. I like a bit of cricket. It may surprise you to hear. I like watching the IPL. I don't watch any other. I don't watch the other short ones. Big Bash or the 100. That's the English one, isn't it? I don't watch the 100 or the Big Bash, but I do watch a bit of IPL. And so we used to have a cricket day, a company cricket day, and everyone piled down to Knowle and Dorridge because it's kind of central. And you could partake in a little friendly cricket if you so desired. And not everybody did. Some of us, mainly those of us from north of the border, got involved in drinking pints and socialising with our colleagues. That's what we did. And I used to have a hog roast. Great, that was a great day out. Absolutely brilliant day out. But it was all signalling people. So testers, installers, designers, all the top management people. And I've said before on the podcast that being a signalling engineer is kind of being a student of accidents. So how I managed to go to Knowle and Dorridge for I did this 4 or 5 years in a row with a huge assortment of signalling people and never know that there was an accident at Knowle and Dorridge. Now, granted it was back in 63, but the first episode I did was College Junction, which was not exactly yesterday either. So I'm amazed. I was amazed when I found out. Someone posted it on one of the socials that there had been an accident in Knowle and Dorridge. And I was very surprised I'd never heard of it, particularly because it is pretty much all signalling. So let's get a look at our map. So here we are. So it's now called Dorridge. I don't remember that. We used to fly down to Birmingham, toddle off to Snow Hill, which is very nice. Sounds lovely. Birmingham, Snow Hill. Sounds really nice. And we used to get the train out to Dorridge, and then we would commence our pints and hog roast. By the way, no taxpayers' dollars were spent in the. This is all that's all off the company's top line. So it wasn't taxpayers' dollars. Don't need to write angrily about that in the comments. You can write angrily about other stuff if you want. So this is the layout of Dorridge Station. You can see the number of sidings still there, but have a hangover from the good oldie days. To the left, West End is Birmingham. Trains approaching from your left. Our accident train, if you like, or train that's going to be involved in the collision, is approaching from the left from Birmingham. And to your right is London, the London end. And that is the way the signal box looks at it in the signal plan, which we'll take a look at as well. Right, so let's put you in the picture here. A lot of this will be gone, but some of it, you can see, you can already get a bit of a vibe of the layout here. Just look at this signalling plan. Now, I am guessing this is a copy of the signalling plan which they've annotated for the investigation into the accident, which is given away up here at the top, 15th of August 1963. Look at how exquisitely drawn this plan is. Not only is it neat as a pin, so it is a copy, but this will be hand drawn. Not only is it neat as a pin, it is to scale. This plan is to a longitudinal scale of approximately 1 to 2,500. So, wow. Again, if you're a whiteboard zoomer, if you like to watch a signalling guy and try and zoom in and read what he's got on his whiteboard, then you will know that my handwriting's not brilliant. And there are signalling drawings out there with my hand drawn stuff on them. Me personally, I was a big stencil guy. I would have stenciled a lot of, like any of this writing I would have had to stencil, or I kind of got in the habit of printing stuff out. So you print stuff out in Word back in the day and put it underneath the drawing that I was doing and write over the top of it, like tracing. So I mean, some of this will be traced, but some of this will just have been, the people who used to do this were so good they could hand draw a lot, well, the writing at least, do the handwriting just totally freehand. But it's a while since I've looked at a hand-drawn signalling plan. Obviously they tend to be a bit rarer these days, but this thing actually has, normally when you draw a signalling plan you don't need to draw a track curvature in it. It's just, as it says here, it's longitudinal scale, so you don't show curves in the signalling plan normally, but this seems to have captured the elegant curves of the railway through the town of Dorridge. So, and I don't doubt that the scale is decent, if not to the nearest millimetre. It will be to the nearest metre probably, or in fact yards, as it says at the top. So here's your layout. Where's my signal box? Have I lost my signal box? Let me see. So the box is in the middle of the sort of island there between the mains and the relief lines, which if I flick back, oh silly, what's happened there? Yeah, so that would have been about here. You sometimes can see a wee footprint. Can't, because there's too much vegetation. You probably, maybe in that gap there, actually that conspicuous gap, why the platforms wouldn't both be the same kind of profile. Slightly strange, so I'd say that's probably, yeah, that's probably your, you can see a signal there, look, right in the middle, signal. So yeah, that's probably where your signal box was. Back to our... How did I manage to jump a page down? Okay, so your signal box is there in the... Come back, you rascal. Signal box is there. So trains are coming left to right from the box as they look out the window, I presume. Now you probably will see both sides. And you have got... So we want to look on the up goods, the up main, to the north of a signal box. So here is the Knowle home signal. So this is Knowle signal box at Knowle and Dorridge station. So now it's just called Dorridge station, but it kind of looks fit. I looked at it from on the map. It looks kind of 50-50. I don't know why they've changed it, but anyway, maybe because of the accident. So Knowle and Dorridge signal box, looking north. The Knowle home signal is to your left on the up main. Now, if you get into yards mode, 335 yards back, there's a Knowle inner distant. So we're talking about, okay, if you haven't been on any of my courses or you're not a signalling engineer, distance signal, it's yellow. And basically all it does is it sits before the red. Now I'm about to lift two reds here, but you get the idea. Imagine I've only got one red. So if you're a train driver, you're approaching the distant, the yellow. You don't have to stop here, but braking distances for trains are into hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 metres. Easily over 1,000 metres. 1,500 metres, not absolutely exceptional or out of the ordinary braking distance, depending on speed obviously. So you can't just stop at a red because you can't see this from 1,500 metres away. So the distant is in effect telling you what the red is doing. So if you're going to have to stop at the red, you need to know that when you get to or when you see the distance. So ideally, in a modern system, your yellow is 1,500, 1,200, whatever metres away from your red. And you cannot... Let me fix that red. You cannot, under any circumstances, have your yellow off first. By off, I mean at an angle of 45 degrees, like so. Because that means that your red is also at 45 degrees, right? So, oops, cheeky. What you have to do is, if you want to change your red, because you might forget, you might take your yellow off and then forget to take your red off, and that gives you a whole host of other problems. I'll not go too deep into that, but suffice to say, if you want to get your yellow to go off, like this one, you have to pull your red first. The associated red has to be off first, okay? So you can never, in theory, pass a yellow that's off without the red being off, which means basically charge on ahead. You're not stopping anytime soon until you see another distant, another yellow somewhere, which is on. So this one's on, which means your red is on. So if you pass a yellow that's on like this, it means that you're stopping at the red up ahead. Pretty simple. And they should be braking distance apart because, well, how else are you going to stop your train? It's a trap. We'll get to that bit. These ones aren't braking distance apart. So there you have it. Now you know how the distant is supposed to work. So the Knowle home, the Knowle inner distant, and it doesn't want to let me. Where's the hand tool? There we go. There's the hand tool. Now here is the Knowle outer distant. So there are two distants. Now interestingly, both of these distants are operated from a single lever in the box, and they are motorised. Now if you had asked me about motorised distance signals, I would say, oh yes, very common. if you're distant purely by definition, because it has to be a way out ahead as far as the driver's concerned. It has to be well before the red. That means it's going to be further from your signal box than anything else, ideally. So distance with motors on them, that's to say, you pull the lever, it's still on a lever, you pull the lever, and a little motor at the bottom of the post goes whizzz and moves your signal for you, rather than you physically pulling it all of that distance. As I said, it's not uncommon. Had you asked me if they were motorised distance in 1963, I would probably have guessed no. I would have said, no, you're trying to catch me out there. That's too early for motorised distance. But there you are, 1963, Knowle has 2 distance, and both of them are motorised. So there you go. And this, when I read this actually in the accident report, this was like a historical thing. It mentions that the distance having failed in previous years, the motors and the distance having failed. So that's interesting. So yeah, if you look back to where the signal box is, Knowle and Dorridge signal box, and you go back from there 377 yards. Sorry, we're in yards. The plan's in yards. We're going to talk in yards. Another one of the fun and exciting things about being a signalling engineer when you're my age. Hang on, tea break. This is my official North York Moors Railway, Steam Railway Tea Company tea mug. The exciting thing about being a signalling engineer of my vintage is that you're not supposed to do anything in yards. But of course, even when I started, the railway is in signalling plans, track plans, all sorts. You've got all sorts of different sources of information. You've got quail maps are a really, really handy thing that aren't produced by any of the kind of official sources, if you like. Quail maps are in miles and chains. The sectional appendix, which is like the official version of quail maps, is in miles and chains. A lot of signalling plans still have yards on them. A lot of bonding plans have got yards on them. A lot of bonding plans where they have overhead line are in kilometres. So it is not uncommon to have to work in miles, yards, chains, metres and kilometres all at once. You have to be very, 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 very careful with your units when you're doing proper stuff. Now we're just having a chat on the internet, just us gals having a bit of fun. If I mix up metres and yards, it's not going to matter. If you do it out there, you can come to some serious mischief. So I mean, that is the whole point of it. Everything's supposed to be in metric, is so that you don't make mistakes. It's a very interesting airplane accident. I think it's called the Gunley Glider. I'm going to have to look this up. But the change from imperial to metric, did they start in Canada? I think they went from Canada to the US, or vice versa, or they were in Canada in the morning doing metric, and they got to the US who hadn't converted from imperial yet. And I think they did a thing where they added fuel in gallons instead of pounds, or pounds instead of gallons. Anyway, they ran out of fuel at 30,000 feet, is the short answer. So similar thing can happen in railways. If you get your miles and your yards and your metres mixed up, you can come to some serious mischief. But that was just a side note. That's actually nothing to do with this accident. But what is to do with that accident is, as you can see, 377 yards from the box to the home, and back from the home it's 335 yards to the inner distant, and what we got, 462 to the next box, Bentley Heath. Is that the box?
I think that's a box. And because these are quite close to what we got, 4, 6, 7, well, best part of 800 yards. And then an extra 100 to the Knowle outer distance. So it's only 900 yards away from the red. And the adjacent box is even before. The adjacent box is only 800 yards away. Give or take. Oh, that's not that. Give or take. Give me a bit of leeway there. Oh, it is the box. I see it at the bottom here. So you're 800 yards back towards Birmingham. Sure, there's Birmingham, Snow Hill. One of my favourites. From Knowles and Dorridge to the outer distance, so that's the yellow. So you've got 900 yards braking distance, and the adjacent box is actually only 800 yards away. So now that's not a massive distance, but you can see there's a bit of curvature there. Maybe that's why they motorised these, because of the curvature. So if you think back to, this is absolute block, mechanical signalling. If you've got to pull a signal via a lever, that's all connected via some metal chains, pulleys, some steel wire. There's weight on the. If you go 900 yards, well, I'm still saying this is quite short. If you go over 900 yards of steel wire, the signaller is actually pulling the weight of that, even though it's held up. They are still pulling the weight of that. So your distance can be quite hard pulls. Some of them can be easy, but over that distance as well, you're going to have shrinkage, contraction or expansion. Obviously contraction in cold weather, expansion in hot weather. So your distance can kind of slacken off and loosen. But I think maybe it's the curvature of the track here is why they've gone for these motorised distance. I'm not sure. But 900 yards isn't all that far of a pull, he says. I'm sure there's some of you watching that work in a signal box with a 800 yard pull that is extremely hefty. But in my head, I'm saying over 1,000 yards is where it starts to get really tricky, and this is only 900 away, so who knows? But there you have it. We've got Knowles and Dorridge. Our train in the incident is going to be coming from Bentley Heath. To our left, to the west from Birmingham. Our outer distance is 900 yards away. And we've also got the thoroughly modern invention, the track circuit. Now, if you don't know how track circuits work, go and watch some of my other episodes. I'm not going to cut the track circuit video back into this, but safe to say, track circuits, in theory, let you know where trains are on your network. And they also stop you doing stupid things, like effectively crashing two trains into each other, because you set up your signalling so that your signalling requires your track circuits to be clear for you to give a train authority to pass a signal or to even approach a signal plus an extra little bit. In this instance, that is called the clearance point beyond the home signal. So back here is our home signal, Knowle. I'm trying not to jump on the recent Oasis reunion bandwagon and sound like I'm saying Knowle too much. So the Knowle home signal is here, 377 yards from the box. Ahead of that, you can see up the top here, there is 440 yards, and that is the clearance point beyond the home signal. So what that is saying is that if you are the Knowle signaller and you're telling the Bentley Heath signaller that they can bring a train up to the Knowle home signal, you also want that clearance point ahead. So that is room for error for the driver approaching the Knowle home signal, which is on or at stop, whatever you want to call it, horizontal. It's a red arm, it's horizontal, it's on, it's at stop. We want you to stop at the home signal. If you don't quite make it, if you skate on through, if your braking performance isn't quite on the money, then you've got up to the clearance point beyond the home signal. Now that is the optimum scenario. And also the signalling equipment was set up so that the track circuits in that clearance point area have to be clear for you to indicate back to Bentley Heath that it is clear. You can't just say, yeah, it's clear, and actually there's a track circuit which is a train on it. So that's the ideal situation, yes. However, if you do have, you can see here there's a new yard, there's an old yard, there's a down yard. So if you think back to 1963, you've got a lot more freight than you do now. Maybe that's a scandalous statement. No, I don't think that's a scandalous statement. Maybe in terms of tons, you have less freight in 1963, but like Knowle and Dorridge are not particularly big towns, but there's 3 yards here, and this isn't uncommon. If you go to your local railway station, peep over the bridge or whatever, you probably find sidings here and there. And that's because like every 1 horse town had somewhere to offload mail bags. And not that I'm saying Knowle and or Dorridge are 1 horse towns, but even 1 horse towns, which Knowles and Dorridge don't like, had a siding, an old loading bank, something where you could offload mail bags, or you could, in this instance you'll see there's a car trailer getting loaded, all sorts of jiggery pokey. So if you are the Knowle signaller, and you do have some jiggery pokery going on in the station area, you can give a different indication back to Bentley Heath, which says the Knowle home signal is only clear up to the Knowle home signal, and that the clearance point is not clear. Okay, that's why it's called a clearance point, because you want it clear up to there to give you that margin of error. So again, if you don't have that margin of error, if the signaller at Knowle gives the Bentley Heath signaller the indication that it's only clear up to the home, then it restricts the aspects that the Bentley Heath signaller can give, if you like. They have to give a more restrictive, they have to give the distant on, and they have to almost bring the train to a stand at their box before they let that train proceed on. So we're seeing how the signalling is set up. I think it's important we look at the braking. So the Ministry of Transport, as it was in 1963, has given us some braking graphs of Pullman Express test runs in the report. So it was a Pullman Express out of Birmingham that crashed on the day, doing 80 miles an hour, up our x-axis on the left, which was appropriate for the time. And what this graph tells you is that from the sighting point of the outer Knowle distant, which, let's flip back. So here is our Knowle signal box is up here. Remember, it has an outer distant that is warning that you need to stop. Well, if it's on, warning that you need to stop at Knowle. The sighting point for that is back here. So this is, ideally you want braking distance from the actual position of the yellow to the red. So you don't actually need to start your braking until you're at the red, in theory. But you can actually see it further away than that. The problem with that is that you can see, what is there, 230 yards from the sighting point to the signal. Now at 80 miles an hour, you're probably going about miles an hour to meters per second is kind of just less than half. So 80 miles an hour, you're probably 35 meters per second you're moving at. So again, 230 yards at 35 meters per second. If you're doing 80 miles an hour, you're coming around a slight bend, you're coming through the Widney Lane tunnel. You've got to have time. The signal's not moving, but you're moving. And at 35 meters a second, again, look at this signal. There's actually 3 arms on that signal. So you've got to pick out, you would have already passed the Bentley Heath distant here. So you're kind of coming round this bend at 35 meters a second. You're looking at a signal with 3 arms on it. There's a level crossing. There's a footbridge. There's a box.
there's a few distractions there. So really 230 yards is nothing. So you wouldn't really expect your driver to be able to react to the signal at the sighting point. And you can kind of see that borne out in the graph. So down here's our sighting point. You can see when they did the test runs, they did 4 test runs, none of them really start the braking that early. Again, obviously these test runs, they know what they're doing, so they're kind of getting on it, the braking a bit earlier. But you can see on the day of the race, the probable point of brake application on the day of the accident is right about the AWS magnet, AWS ramp as they're calling it here. So right at the signal, the braking started. And you can see from this graph the curves. The point of impact was 1500 meters. See, I did it. I mixed up my imperial and my metric. 1500 yards. The point of impact was from the sighting point. So it probably wanted, just going by these curves, it probably wanted the best part of 1600. So from 80 miles an hour, basically what the graph tells you is that going by standard train performance expected of that train, you probably wanted, and the distance is it 230, so you probably wanted about 1300 yards braking. That's 1300 yards is what you're needed. 1350 was really needed. Now obviously you can see from where the train started braking, you were well short. So the train was well short of coming to a stop because it needed 1300 yards. As we know, we've only got from 1500 back to so you've only got less than 1200. So in terms of basically they did these tests to prove that the driver performance or the train performance weren't contributing factors in the accident. They never really had enough braking distance to get this train to a stop before it came to the point of the impact. So we've seen what signalling equipment's set up. We've got a nice bit of electromechanical interlocking. We've got the block system, and we know that we don't have enough braking between these boxes. We've also, one thing I haven't alluded to actually, which is actually very important, is these trains weigh hundreds of tons, and you can see just here these little markers. These are gradient markers. So the great news if you're going in the down direction, if you're going towards Birmingham, towards Solihull, you're going uphill. So that's what these angles mean. So this one here, that's 1 in 330 rising, and then when you get to the Knowle shunting neck, you're 214 rising. There must have been some amount of surveying done in these back in the day. I mean, you're only talking 300 yards between these, you're getting differences. Lovely stuff. Again, gradient markers all drawn to the angle that the running lines are at. Exquisite signalling plan. Absolutely exquisite. This would have been beyond my ability. I'm saying that. I'm going to say this would have been well beyond my abilities to draw something like this. So, unfortunately, in the direction that the accident happened, if you're coming the other way, if you're coming the up direction, which is from left to right, out of Birmingham, these gradients are all falling. So, you're going downhill. They're not massive gradients, but they are going downhill, and from this point here, slightly level there, slight rise, 640. It's very short. That's it. 50, 100 yards tops. Not even 100 yards probably. So you're falling all the way down into Knowle. The higher the number, the less it is. So I'm surprised to see 3,000 there. In terms of braking, I think you would normally, above 1,000, you consider kind of flat. So that's a very detailed, I would say. That's a very detailed reading. So when you get to the 200s though, that's steepish. So you've got hundreds of tons of train trying to brake, but it's also hurtling downhill, and gravity is pulling you towards Knowle. So that kind of worsens the whole situation. If it had been in the down direction, would we have got away with it? I don't know. In these gradients, they might just have got away with it. Hard to say. It's hard to be 100% definitive on that, but it certainly would have been a bit closer. But there you go, you're in the picture. You've got the downhill gradients, you've got inadequate braking, and you've got the signalling equipment set up to make sure that you do not give a line clear back to Bentley Heath unless you've got the line clear up to Lapworth. So let's, from the Ministry of Transport report, say what the rules governing that were. So here they are. Here is how that whole inadequate braking thing is supposed to be managed. Supposed to be. I'm going verbatim here. Owing to inadequate braking distance beyond the distance signal of some signal boxes at Knowle, the Western region have a special regulation in their block regulations, which are still applicable on the whole of this main line. The special regulation is number 4A, and among the boxes at which it is required to be applied are those where a distance signal is less than 1,000 yards from the home signal. So the Knowle distance is less than 1,000 yards from the home signal. And the gradient is falling. So we've established that. It is therefore required to be applied at Knowle and Dorridge in accepting trains on the up main line from Bentley Heath Crossing, which I've been lazily calling Bentley Heath, apologies. This regulation requires the signalman at Knowle and Dorridge to obtain line clear, or line clear to clearing point only, from Lapworth. Okay, so our Knowle and Dorridge signaller must get a line clear from ahead, okay, in the direction of travel. Lapworth is right, before he gives a line clear to Bentley Heath for a crossing, Bentley Heath crossing for a train. If the signalman at Knowle and Dorridge has received only a warning acceptance from Lapworth, or if he has received train out of section for the last train, and or providing the line is clear to the clearing point beyond his home signal, he must not send full line clear, but he may send the signal line clear to clearing point only to Bentley Heath crossing. That's 6 beats. So they're talking about the block bells. If you're familiar with how absolute block signal box works, you use a system of bells to communicate, because absolute block is 40 years younger. Say it with me. 40 years younger than the telephone. So it uses telegraph. So there's a little tappy buzzer, tap, 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 and you get bells in the adjacent box. So that's what 6 beats here, 222 means. You do tap, 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 tap. Okay, so that's how signallers are supposed to send messages to each other, using the taps. Having received the latter signal, the signalman at Bentley Heath crossing must keep all his signals at danger until the approaching train has passed within the distance signal. So look at the effect of that. This PDF doesn't want to behave. Stop it. Don't know why it's doing that. Okay, so the Bentley Heath signaller has got a distance out here, and if they have not received a line clear from Knowle, then they must keep their signals on. So again, this has got a further sighting point away back here somewhere. Okay, so your train doing 80 miles an hour sees this Bentley Heath distance on. It means that they are going to start their braking at worst at the Bentley Heath distance. So
before this signaller can take his signals off to show proceed, to show go ahead, the Knowle and Dorridge signaller here has to actually get a line clear from the next one ahead before authorising back to Bentley Heath to say, yep, everything's clear up ahead, because you don't have the braking distance from Bentley Heath to Knowle. So the effect of that would be, of course, that your braking for Knowle starts at the Bentley Heath outer distance. Well, he doesn't have an outer distance, just the Bentley Heath distance. So that's another 1,100 yards. 1148, as it says up there. So that's effectively adding that braking distance onto the Knowle and Dorridge signal box, if you like. So if you're to stop at Knowle and Dorridge, you're supposed to see this signal at stop, which means that as you pass that signal, you're braking, and you might get to the Bentley Heath box, and the Bentley Heath home, which is here, is this one on the post high up here. Once the signaller at Bentley Heath can see that you're suitably slowed down, then he can take his signals off to let you approach Dorridge, Knowle and Dorridge slowly. So that is the purpose of those two sections there. If you get the line clear all the way up to Lapworth, doesn't matter, everything's clear. So that's the purpose of the Knowle and Dorridge person getting the line of clear to their right as they're looking at the track. So paragraph 20. The regulation also requires the signalman at Knowle and Dorridge to arrange for the signalman at Bentley Heath crossing to keep his distant signal at caution for a train that is to be stopped at the Knowle and Dorridge signals. Again, the signalman at Bentley Heath crossing is required to keep a close watch on the Knowle and Dorridge distant signals, and, if they do not act properly, to advise the Knowle and Dorridge signalman immediately. So there's kind of two layers of things going on there. Not only is the Knowle signaller supposed to check ahead before giving the line clear back the way, effectively clearing two sections at once, the signaller at Bentley Heath, he can see that Knowle outer distant. So if he has given a line clear, he is also expected when he takes his signal. So if he's told line clear from Knowles and Dorridge at Bentley Heath, he effectively, as far as the rules go, he essentially knows then that it's clear all the way to Lapworth. So if the train is approaching here at 80 miles an hour and he's got a line clear all the way up to Lapworth, the Bentley Heath signaller doesn't need to worry about stopping this train. So he wants to take his signals off. So that means these ones actually go down. These are lower quadrant signals. So they go down to 45 degrees. My little samples that I showed you are upper quadrant, so when you flip them, they go up the way. There's a reason for that, but we'll not go into that at this stage. So when the Bentley Heath signaller has a line clear, he knows he's effectively got a line clear all the way up to Lapworth. So he just wants his signals to come off. But under the regulations, he is duty bound to make sure that the Knowle and Dorridge signaller is playing the game. By which I mean that if he's got a line clear from Lapworth, the Knowle and Dorridge signaler's signal should also be off. So the Knowle and Dorridge outer distance should be set to come off for this train that's approaching Bentley Heath with its signals off. Now, there's another slight layer of complexity here, that if the Knowle signaller pulls the outer distance to the off position, it won't go off until the Bentley Heath ones go off first. So the Bentley Heath signaller, when they get the line clear from Knowle and Dorridge, the line should be clear up to Lapworth, so they don't want to stop the train. You can see there's not actually a station at Bentley Heath, it's protecting the crossing. So the Bentley Heath signaller wants to close the crossing, the road crossing, and then pull their signals off. Doesn't want to delay this train's not stopping locally, doesn't want to delay the train, pull their signals off. When he pulls his signals off,
he wants to be looking. He doesn't want to be. He is duty bound to look at the Knowle outer distance because it should come off when his signals come off. So all the driver sees is signals that are off or at proceed at 45 degrees, up or down. In this instance, down, as opposed to mine that went up. So there's a bit of onus on both these signals to be making sure that they're following the rules. But before we look at that, we'll talk a wee bit about kind of wider engineering ideas. So rules are great, but signalling engineers like myself have a strong distaste for people. I jest, of course. What I mean is inner systems. I've said it before on the podcast, I'll say it again. Normally, in any signalling system, any engineering system, the weakest point are the human beings. So, signalling engineers are very strongly predisposed to not letting human beings do anything at all if they possibly can help it. So let's say, for example, here, just since I've got my little distance signal to hand, right? Now, distance signals, if you're a signalling engineer and you're designing distance signals, you know that they need cleaned and the lamps at the top of them might need to be adjusted or whatever. So the safest thing to do is to not have people have to climb these. So nowadays you get what are very, very clever, lightweight and foldable signals. So rather than, if you have to go to maintain this signal, there's a hinge at the bottom of the post at the black bit. Not that hinge, that's to move the arm up and down. But modern lightweight signals can fold down, so the maintenance can be done at ground level. So that's designing out the risk of having to climb it. So that is the best way to design your equipment. Design the risks out, take the risks and just remove them from the system. The other thing, of course, you can do is you say, okay, there's rules. I'm going to give you a rule. If you have to climb this signal, you have to put a harness on and you have to attach that harness to something as you climb up, so that if you fall, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the risk of falling, risk of working at height. If you fall, you're going to hurt yourself. You know, this is not even to scale. This is not a particularly tall post, but signal posts come much taller than this. You could be in a gantry. So we'll say, here's the rule. The rule is, if you go up a signal post, you have to have a harness on. But how do I know that that person that's going up that signal is going to wear the harness? I don't. So that is not as favourable as designing out the problem and saying, okay, signal's going to fold down so you don't ever have to climb it. So in this instance, let's see how the signalman did following the rules. Not well. Okay, evidence of signalmen. Signalman, this is at Bentley Heath, the top one, paragraph 31, who was nearly 65 years of age, had been a signalman for 40 years. So we're not talking about, to use a common phrase up my way, daft boys. 65-year-old signalman who's been a signalman for 40 years and had worked at Bentley Heath Crossing since 1948. He came on duty at that box at 6 a.m. Okay, I'm not going to read that full thing, but the point being, we've not got greenhorns, as they say. I've been watching Deadliest Catch. They don't have greenhorns here. Now, that was a signalman at Bentley Heath. The signalman at Knowle and Dorridge, whose name I've redacted, well, presumably they are no longer with us since this was 63. Anyway, signalman at Dorridge was 55 years of age, had been a signalman for 27 years and had worked Knowle and Dorridge since 1948. So both of these guys have worked there since 1948. It's 1963. They know what they're doing. They know the area. They know the box. They probably, if you speak to signalmen, they'll tell, oh, X train's due at X time and Y train's due at Y time. They know the traffic patterns inside out, generally. So here we are. He came on duty at 6:45 on the day of the accident. His duty was extended up to 2:45 p.m. Not an enormously long day. I mean, I don't think these are a particularly quiet box. So Kinda busy. It's an early start. He had arrived on the same duty each day that week, so very familiar task. He, or ex-signalman at Dorridge, said that the 10:15 a.m. up goods train arrived on the up goods loop at 10:40. Now, this is the train that's going to be crashed into, is the goods train. After working in the new yard under the control of a shunter, the engine and the brake van were taken to the old yard to pick up the 2 car flats. So they're picking up car wagons. So, been in the new yard, taken to the old yard. So the old yard's not out of use. Monkeying around in the new yard, up to the old yard. All under the control of the shunter. Now where are we? After that, they returned along the up main line to the new yard in preparation for this movement. He took them from the down yard and shunted them to the up relief line, where they stood at signal number 39. So the up relief is 1, 2, 3, 4 from the top. On the down yard, they're on the relief line at disc 39, just here. Okay, and he's preparing to take them to the new yard to collect. No, they're not. That's lies. After working in the new yard under the control of a shunter, the engine and brake van were taken to the old yard to pick up the 2 car flats, and then to the down yard to pick up the hopper wagon. So they went new yard, old yard, down yard, picked up the 2 wagons, and they're back at 39. After that, they were to be returned along the up main line to the new yard. So here they are, stopped at 39. They're headed for the new yard, which, as you can see there, let's have a little zoom. Let's have a little zoom in the signalling plan. So to get from the down yard, they're going to have to get across this set of points here, which I don't have a number for, but you get the idea. And that is going to need to put them on the up main. Realistically, from the down yard, they're going to have to run all the way up the up main to get to the new yard, because there's no crossover. If they go round the back of these platforms here, there's no crossover. So they're going to have to go facing into traffic to get to where they're going. Now, that was all. You can see that all started about 10:40. So there's a lot of freight train jiggery pokery there, moves up and down and attaching bits and detaching bits. The signaller at Knowle and Dorridge said that he was offered the 1 p.m. express train by the signalman at Bentley Heath crossing at 1.7 p.m. So I presume from reading the rest of this, I've realised that they mean 1 hour and 7 minutes. I don't know why they call it 1.7. Maybe the typewriter didn't have a zero. It must have zeros because it's 10:40. I don't know why they didn't call it 1:07, because 1.7 p.m. doesn't make any sense. But they mean 1 minute, 1 hour past the meridian and 7 minutes. So the express train was offered to the signalman at Knowles and Dorridge by the Bentley Heath signalman at 1:07, and that he accepted it at once at full line clear. Now, the rule says he's supposed to check ahead with Lapworth, but he just gave a line clear. So he did that with his Morse code tapping on his bells, the block bells is more commonly known as, and he also would have given indicator on his block instrument. He did not, however, enter these signals in the train register. So these old mechanical boxes, electromechanical boxes, have a logbook, like a ship's log. They're supposed to record everything that goes on as it happens, and so that it's logged in order, in time order. So you put the time and you put the event. So that's what happens in the train register. He did not, however, enter these signals in the train register at once. He agreed that he had not asked line clear for the train from Lapworth before accepting it from Bentley Heath crossing, at full line clear. But he said that he obtained the line clear from Lapworth immediately afterwards. The train register at Lapworth shows, however, that the request for line clear from Knowle and Dorridge was not made until about 3 minutes later. The signaller at Knowle and Dorridge explained that it was his custom to give the line clear to Bentley Heath crossing first and then ask for the line clear from Lapworth, and that he did this knowing that regulation 4A applied to this box, at his box, and forbade it. It's forbidden. It is forbidden. He went on to say that it was not always possible to clear the signals for the up train immediately after giving the line clear to Bentley Heath crossing because of movements on the down main or other lines for which signal levers needed pulled in priority. He did not, however, clear his signals for the Pullman train on this occasion, although there was no other train moving at the time. And the reason he gave was that he was concerned with the shunting movement. So the signaller's going on about his business, he's thinking about the shunting. This movement was, he said, a regular one and was done sometimes before and sometimes after the passage of the Pullman train. So he does the same thing every day. He moves the freight train about, he gets that set up. Sometimes he does it before the Pullman arrives, sometimes he does it after. On this day, unfortunately, happens to be doing them both at the same time. So 37, the signaller at Knowles and Dorridge said that he completely forgot that he had accepted the Pullman train. He could not recollect whether he reversed the crossover from the up relief line to the up main line and cleared signal 39 for the shunting movement before he gave the line clear or afterwards. Well, whichever was the case, he allowed the shunting movement to proceed. He then received at 1:12 p.m. train entering section from Bentley Heath crossing for the Pullman train. He realised at once that he had made a mistake and he attempted to stop the shunting movement by using a red flag at the London end of the box, but the movement did not stop until the leading vehicle was opposite his box. So there it is. There's unfortunately once that move has been made, there are also no other signals. So the signaller has no way now to prevent the freight train approaching the up main. And as per the testimony of the signaller and the drivers of the freight train, he managed to get them to a stop by, hanging out the window and waving red flags. Gets the freight train to a stop, but we're approaching disaster, and there's no way now for us to stop that other train. There's no amount of flags or having our fingers crossed are going to change the fact that it's coming at us at speed in a downhill gradient, and the driver's not had enough warning of the braking. So a couple of other things that you can kind of add to it. The investigator says, I questioned the signaller Knowle closely about his actions, and he was adamant that he had not cleared the signals for the Pullman train and then put them back to danger to give precedence to the shunting movement. So that's one thing that he could have done. He could have started pulling those signals off and then tried to put them back. That would have been physically possible, but as it says, he's adamant he didn't do that. He says, from the test that I made, I am satisfied that it is most unlikely he could have done this. He was equally adamant that it had not been in his intention to keep his up signals at danger for the Pullman train while he allowed the shunting movement to pass into the new yard. To have done so would have been a very serious breach of block, and it would have detained the train. So he's got no intention of slowing this train down. He's just not thinking. He was insistent that the reason for his mistake was merely that he had completely forgotten that he had given the line clear for the Pullman train. The only explanation that he could give was, again, that he was concerned with the shunting movement. He said that he might have accepted the is line clear signal for the train automatically without thinking. Unfortunately, that is what human beings do. Get familiar with a task, maybe they're tired, they had an early start, they're some more senior, only slightly more senior than me. I'm not saying that their age was definitely a factor in it, but having that 6:45 start, It doesn't allude to them having had any breaks. And they sometimes human beings just get so familiar with a task, even when it's something enormously high risk. Like I said, the case of the Gimli glider, they're fueling up the plane. It's a pretty high risk activity, making sure you get enough jet fuel on the plane. You might think, how could you be so stupid? How could you be so dumb to make such a mistake? But human beings make these sort of mistakes all the time. Especially if it's something you're familiar with. Again, this is something you see borne out in statistics in the railway. People who have accidents, guys who are like guys and gals who are apprentices or trainees, everything scares them. Electricity, trains, the weather, being out in the dark. People who get very, very familiar with working on the railway, people with 20, 30 years plus experience, sometimes get complacent and they just think, well, I've not had an accident for 10 years or whatever, and they fall into performing things without really thinking about it. Obviously, like I said, these signallers, line clear, line clear. If you want to go and learn how to work an absolute block box, you might find it absolutely mind-boggling. Once you've worked in the same box since 1948 and it's 1963, it's like riding a bike or playing the bagpipes on a unicycle. Seen it done. Not in Scotland, some guy in America on the internet riding a unicycle playing bagpipes. Looks really, really difficult. Once you can do it without thinking. And this is one of the problems. This is, I think, as far as we can see, this is what happened here. But you can reinforce this. There's more questioning, obviously. I questioned X further about his statement that he normally gave the full line clear to Bentley Heath Crossing before obtaining line clear for the train from Lapworth, as per the regulations. He said that he fully understood the purpose of Regulation 4A, so he understands the risk. And he explained that he only did this if there was no train in the section to Lapworth. He knew that it was contrary to the regulations. If there happened to be a train in the section at Lapworth, he would only give line clear to clearing point to Bentley Heath Crossing. And the train register showed that he had in fact given this signal on 3 occasions on the previous day. So, again, that familiarity breeds contempt with the risks. He knows the regulation. He knows what it's for. He understands the risk that he's taking by not applying that regulation. But he does it every day. So, and I think in my last episode there was some very, very British statements, some uniquely British statements in the Ministry of Transport report, and there's one in this one. So again, it's the signaller at Knowle and Dorridge. Mr. X said that he was in good health and was not tired. He maintained that he had nothing on his mind and had no domestic trouble of any kind. When asked if he had any financial embarrassment, he replied, "None at all. The reverse is the case." So, we're looking for, are there any outside influences? Was he distracted? And he's at least claiming that he wasn't distracted. So really this accident comes down to human behaviour. People getting familiarity breeds contempt, as I say. So he knew the regulations, he knew what the risks were, but he did it every day and he got away with it. Unfortunately, we didn't get lucky on this day in September 1963. And that is one of the reasons why signalling is complicated. Because you try as much as you can as a signalling engineer to make sure to know, not to think or to guess or to hope, but to know that the signalling equipment is set up to prevent people doing dangerous things. Conclusions then. First conclusion is, if you're enjoying the podcast, if you're enjoying the signalling info on these accidents, give us a like if you like it. If you don't, get in the comments, let me know what could be better. This one is trying to be a little quicker, trying to move things along a little bit more than the last episode. Was quite interesting in signalling terms, but I think maybe I dragged out episode 3 a little long, so episode 4 trying to be a little sharper, trying to remember to enunciate and not put too many Scottish words in. I did really well when we got to Widney Lane, which is highly amusing to me because Widney in Glasgowese means I would not. I wouldn't do that if I was you. So there you go. I've given you some local knowledge. If you ever come to Glasgow and there's something you wouldn't do, you can say Widney. If you're enjoying it, give us a like, subscribe, and you'll get the next episodes pinged up on your YouTube account next time you log in. Otherwise, let me know in the comments what you're not sure about. If you've got questions, I do keep an eye on the comments. So if you've got questions, put them in there and I'll try and get back to you ASAP. Let's get back to the report conclusions. The primary cause of the accident was the action of signalmen at Knowle and Dorridge in obstructing the up main line after having given full line clear for the Pullman train. Whether he gave the line clear and then set the route and cleared the signal for the shunting movement or vice versa is uncertain, but I think that he must have given line clear first. Whichever he did was highly irregular. The signaller, who had a good record, the signaller, who had a clear record, was a good witness, and I accept without question his statement that he did not deliberately keep the signals at danger for the Pullman train to enable the shunting movement to be made. He frankly admitted his serious mistake, which he said occurred because he completely forgot the line clear had been given. He could explain his forgetfulness only by saying that he was concerned with the shunting movement and that he may have given full line clear automatically. The shunting movement was, however, a regular one, and I can see no reason why it should have concerned him so much. It seems his unthinking action in replying to the "is line clear" automatically is more likely to be the cause. And it may be that it was his admitted habit of disregarding Regulation 4A that allowed him to work so automatically. If he had obeyed that regulation, he would have obtained line clear from Lapworth before giving it to Bentley Heath Crossing. And it is unlikely that he would have given these additional bell signals automatically and without thinking. It should be mentioned here, however, that if Mr. X had adopted the correct procedure, he could have been given line clear for the train movement by the signalman at Lapworth, and he would have then been entitled to give full line clear to Bentley Heath. So the line ahead was clear. If he had gone and got it from Lapworth, it was available. So it possibly wouldn't have stopped him doing what he did anyway, because there was no other reason for him to keep the signals at danger. Now, paragraph 60 gives us a bit about the Bentley Heath Crossing signaller. Signalman Y, because we've already got X, of Bentley Heath Crossing must bear some share of the responsibility for this accident. Having received full line clear for the Pullman train from Knowle and Dorridge, he was in order in clearing all his signals, including his distance signal. He, however, also understood that Regulation 4A was applicable at Knowle and Dorridge because of the short braking distance beyond the outer distant signal of that box. That regulation did not specifically require him to remind the signaller at Knowle and Dorridge if the lowering of the latter's distance signals was delayed, but it did imply that such action should be taken. And Mr. Y said that he normally took it. Instead, however, he went to get a broom to sweep up, and it was 45 minutes before he was off duty. If he had been alert and noticed that the outer distance signal did not come off when he lowered his home signal, and he had reminded the signalman at Knowle and Dorridge about this, the latter might have been able to save the situation by getting the shunting movement clear of the up main line. So, in all of these episodes so far, I've talked about Swiss cheese, the layers. You need the holes in your Swiss cheese to line up to be able to get your accident through. Your accident, if you like, is a coming towards your Swiss cheese, and the holes need to line up for it to get all the way through. And there are different layers with different holes in them. So, in this instance, had they applied the regulation, had he thought about contacting Lapworth first, it might have stopped him thinking about It might have given him the idea that, yes, I've contacted the signaller ahead of me, and this train that I've given a line clear for is coming all the way through. So it might have stopped him thinking about bringing that freight movement on. It might have just broken that train of thought where he was kind of automatically doing stuff, pulling signals and not really thinking about what he was doing. It might have stopped that. We don't know. Again, the signaller at the Bentley Heath box should have, and says in his evidence, that in previous occasions he would occasionally get in touch with the Knowle and Dorridge signaller if he didn't see his distant come off. He says, on this occasion I was sweeping up, I was about to go off duty. So had this been earlier in the day, he's not going off duty, he wouldn't have been off to sweep up. So accidents never happen on their own. There's always a combination of things. Unfortunately, in this instance, these things have all occurred at once, so that's the holes in the Swiss cheese have lined up, and we've ended up with an accident. Ultimately, though, although this regulation is designed to prevent them causing an accident with that inadequate braking, the real thing is that the inadequate braking here, the diesel traction is getting faster and faster. These boxes were built for the steam age. You've got diesel traction horsing up and down at 80 miles an hour. It's not, what we're finding out here is that it's not really suitable. So the great news is, would it happen again? I don't believe that there is a setup anywhere in the UK where something like this could happen. That is my assertion. So even at this point, even back in 63, in the recommendations, the semaphore distance signal on the up main line for Bentley Heath crossing is about to be replaced by a colour light, and I am glad to know that, as a feature of the work, an electrical control will be included that will prevent it from being cleared until the Knowle and Dorridge distance signals have been cleared. Signalling engineers to the rescue. So, tons of places since 1963 have been re-signalled with colour light signalling, and I would say today there would be almost nowhere. I say almost because there's always one situation where people go, but almost nowhere where inadequate braking from yellow to red would be permitted these days. There are layers. Again, if I'm a signalling engineer designing a new layout, I might design it. I can't I can't take it anywhere. I can't get it built. I can't even get it looked at until someone else, independent and suitably qualified from me, has looked at that and said, let's have a look at your braking. So even in designing a signalling system, we are aware that the human beings are pretty fallible. So there are layers of independence built in that prevent you designing something with inadequate braking. And again, if I design it, someone else has to check it. And once it's checked and it's all put together, you take that to another panel. If this was a job for Network Rail, you would have to take that to a panel of expert signalling engineers. And if you had anything, part of that would be a report on the braking. And if you had anything that didn't have appropriate braking distances, you would have to have your yellow pages down your trousers and explain yourself and explain what you were doing about the risks. Again, so the Knowle and Dorridge one was replaced with an electrical control, so that is, it could be subject to equipment failure, but it would be designed to fail in such a way where if it's not working properly, everything goes red or everything's at stop. Again, that's one of the reasons why, if there are signalling problems, the railway doesn't work as smoothly as you would like it. But that is because the equipment is designed to make sure that accidents don't happen. Not to think, there's a rule to stop it, it's fine. No, the equipment will make sure that it doesn't. Another thing that they did
to kind of improve things. Again, they're looking at immediate improvements. So there's a, what if there wasn't the money to re-signal, that area? You might have had to wait 10 years, but they're looking at everything they can do quickly. So paragraph 70, in order to know whether regulation 4A is to be applied at his box, a signalman, you can get signal persons now, but this is 1963, has to study the gradient and signal box diagrams and calculate from the latter the distance between the distant and home signals. I therefore recommend further that when this regulation is to be applied, the fact should be stated in the signal box instructions. So there's a set of rules, right? There's a railway rule book. Certain sections apply to drivers, certain sections apply to shunters, certain sections apply to signallers. Each signal box will also have its own specific signal box instructions. I've said before that there's an enormous, big, long set of standards and rules for signalling. It's not one size fits all. It's attempting to be one size fits all, but it doesn't quite work out that way. So every signal box has its own set of signal box instructions. So like this report says, the rule 4A is if there is not 1,000 yards of braking between the home and the distant, and it's a falling gradient, you have to apply the rule. Now you turn up at the signal box, you will certainly have distances in yards from the box to each signal, but you wouldn't have the distance signal to signal. So the signaller has to get into the box, has to know if the gradient's falling, so it has to read the gradient charts, compare that to where his home signal is, look at the distance, subtract the distance from the distant to the home. That's a lot of work for what is a really, really dangerous scenario, an under-brake signal, a signal where you don't have adequate braking, and you're asking the signaller, I want you to jump through a couple of hoops and figure out, does this regulation apply, and then I want you to apply it, and I want you to move trains on both lanes, and I want you to fill in the train register as you go. You can see how the layers of it being complicated start to build. So you want to make that idiot proof, basically. Here it is in the blooming signal box instructions. Yes, rule 4A applies at this signal, at that signal. That's listed out for you. Make it really, really simple. So that is a thing which we do much better nowadays, I think. If there are complex rules, we don't just go, well, a signal will figure it out. The signal will go into the box and start measuring all the distances. No, that's in there, that's in the instructions. So we're doing that well. Pleased with that. Pleased with how we're doing with that. As well as better instructions to signallers and signalling guys, signalling engineers coming to the rescue and designing better systems. I think one thing we're also much tighter on is this. So Mr. Hale, the inspector, District Inspector Hale, had been in charge of this district for some 14 months. He said that he had frequently visited Knowle and Dorridge box, knew Signalman X, and had a high opinion of his working capabilities. Later on he goes on to say that he had not, however, made any checks specifically to ascertain whether Regulation 4A was being carried out, and he did not know that that X was in the habit of disobeying it. Mr. Hale added that the boxes at Knowle and Dorridge and Bentley Heath were provided with gradient diagrams. So I think one thing that we are much better at is managing. I spoke about this in other episodes. It could be a big hole in your Swiss cheese, competence management. So the district inspector had been down to the boxes, been in the boxes, watched these guys work. Yeah, they're good guys, they seem to know what they're doing. That's not enough anymore. What we do now is we have, again, the district inspector thought these guys were doing a good job, thought they knew what they were doing, thought they understood the rules. That isn't enough for us anymore. We need to know. So signallers nowadays are regularly tested in the rules. You have regular rules exams. So although it is believed that they knew the rules and they said that they knew the rules, if they had been on more frequent rules exams, would they have thought about the risks more? Would they have taken a bit more time and thought about what they were doing when they were not applying this regulation and the danger that they were leaving out there? So that's one thing that's much better. And again, competence management is, it's written down, so it's not just, and there's a structure to it. So you're not just kind of guessing, well, I spoke to this guy and he seems okay. It is, an assessment of, are they alert? Do they know the rules? Do they know the risks? Things like that. So we're doing much better. I don't think we'll have a repeat of Knowle and Dorridge accident. I think we're on the case. And that wraps up another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know in the comments. If you didn't, let me know politely in the comments.